This individual says they've just come across our podcast and love the content. Thank you. I've been playing around with the idea of financial independence for our family. The podcast gives me hope. Our goal is part-time work for my husband, plus myself by the age of 50 to 60, wanting an income stream of around $30,000 a year or more. I have played around with a few scenarios, but would love some input into what you guys would do. So I'm going to describe some scenarios now, but just to recap, this is a couple that wants to be able to go part-time because of an investment portfolio that brings them in about $30,000 a year, which allows them to go part-time by that age of 50 or 60, so they're not slogging away at that age. So back to the question. Situation. We've just paid off our home. Congratulations. It's worth $700,000. Investment. They also have an investment property worth $440,000 and a loan of $160,000. The rent a year is bringing in $18,000. Sounds like, $300 to $400 a week. Family of 4. Mum's 35, dad's 38, kids 1 and 3. Sounds like you've got your hands full at the moment with those kids for sure. Total income between is $92,000 a year before tax. Of that $92,000, $20,000 goes towards investment property, principal and interest loan repayment plus expenses. $24,000 is saved or invested. $48,000 living expenses. Just before I continue on the question, let me pass on a big congrats from Dave and I that you're managing to save about 25% of that. That's pretty awesome. It's a huge number. Last bit of the question. Our plan is to put money into ETFs and build an emergency fund using the $24,000 a year. Also pay down rental loans so we have income or sell and put the money into something else. Is this a realistic plan to chip away at to eventually get to our financial independence goal? That's a great question. Do you want to have it?
Excellent situation and an interesting case study. Super interesting. Actually, mate, it's even better than what you said, because remember, not only are they able to save or invest $24,000, but they're also putting $20,000 of their cash towards the investment property. So really, they're actually saving roughly half of their income. And as a family of 4, being able to live on, just under 50 grand without a mortgage, I think that is pretty damn good. Many people would say that is, not achievable, but that's quite impressive. So based on those numbers, I did kind of flesh out a scenario of what would happen if you roll this situation forward a number of years, and it does seem very realistic. So given the numbers that they've told us, it is extremely possible that they can semi-retire, both of them actually, by the age of 50, which is possibly better than they thought. That's at the closest end of the band that they were hoping for. So if we just flesh out this scenario, so just give me a minute. All right, so in 12 years time, you guys would be aged 50 and 47. We'll say that your investment property over that time has 4% per annum growth, which seems pretty reasonable. So it would be worth roughly $700,000 in 12 years time. And the loan would likely be zero, given you're putting 20 grand towards it per year, and it's currently only got a loan of 160. So there's probably going to be debt free at that point. We'll also say that you're putting 24 grand a year into your shares, as you were suggesting that you would. So in that time frame, you'd end up with $450,000 in a share portfolio, assuming the returns are something like 7 or 8%. And that would be good enough for an income stream of $20,000 a year. So at this point, really, you have a couple of options. You could actually sell the investment property, which you said you were open to, and we'll say that you get something like $550,000, after paying selling costs and some capital gains tax and all the rest of it. So if you add that to your share portfolio, that would actually give you a $1 million portfolio of shares, which is pretty damn good. And that would be good enough for an income stream of comfortably $40,000 a year. So that was actually more than you were hoping for, and that would make it super easy to semi-retire, even if your expenses grow over those 12 years, which I'm sure they would. You haven't really mentioned what your super looks like or whether you're incorporating that into your plan, but it's likely that that's going to be a few hundred grand or a couple of $100,000 extra to that scenario. So that would put it, even better than what we've suggested here. So at that point, you'd only have 10 years longer to wait for it, which is pretty cool. So I would say based on those numbers, there's definitely no reason why you can't easily semi-retire by the age of 50 and begin living a way more free and self-directed life. So that is very, very cool.
Yeah, Dave's so on the money. Those numbers sound right to me too. And, when I was reading this question earlier, I know it's a cliche, but just again, you should feel pretty positive. Even if things go a little better or a little worse, or, something happens, you're still that's a remarkably good position. Something that's never lost on me is it's so difficult to conceive just how many Australians are under financial stress of some sort. And that's a great position to be in. Even having paid off the home and having an investment and putting that kind of money aside, even if you just did that for 5 years, you'd be in such a comfortable basket of people compared to so many others. So just again, a big congrats and keep going, and don't feel like it's unrealistic. I would say too that what I like about your example and your situation is that it really speaks to the power as well of, I'm assuming if you paid off your home and it's worth $700,000, you're probably not in a major city, would be my guess, or at least in the denser part of it. Maybe my Sydney bias is kicking in there, but that's actually actually a great thing because, you talk about, 700K with a total income between you and a partner of 92K. There are so many people that live in the city, like Sydney, where I'm from, who like the thought of 92,000 a year combined income before tax is like, that's like putting you on the street kind of worries at that point. And I love how, because I grew up in regional Australia like Dave, and I'm making an assumption about where you live here because I know there's some city parts that are quite cheap too, but not living in these big hotshot cities can just be so powerful to finding like a comfortable life without an exceptional amount of difficulty because, that income can take you so far just because the cost of living is lower. You're taxed a lot less on that combined income. Sorry to bring up tax again, than someone earning, people say, oh yeah, but in the city, I'll earn 220K. It's like, yeah, and you lose like 40% of it to the government, So you're probably paying very little tax compared to, someone with their $3 million homes. You've already paid off your home. I just think it's a great example of how, not everyone needs a $3 million home in the suburbs of Sydney. I'm not trying to imply that, everyone can necessarily escape that either. I wouldn't want to sound so shallow with it, but it's so interesting to me. And again, that's just an awesome amount of money to put aside. There's so much power to being able to save that money. Like what I've seen time and time again is like fundamentally your financial independence outcome is nearly always down to what, how much of that income you can carve out. And the fact that you're carving out such a big chunk means you're basically guaranteed for success. If that number goes down and your house goes up, that's harder. Keeping that money carved out is so important. Just to say too, Dave and I have looked at some numbers. Pretty sure you could let that slip a little bit too. They're very strong numbers for how much you can save and put towards a house. So would also hope you don't kind of come away here thinking, oh, well, if you have to save and pay off the house 30% slower, that, that's suddenly going to send you out the window. It's like, no, you've got a bit of buffer there with being able to nearly put half that amount aside. So, again, just congrats and keep going.
Yeah, there's definitely some cushion in this situation. If they wanted to, take it a little bit slower and maybe spend a little bit more along the way, that'd be completely fine. Depending on, they're going to have to juggle, what kind of, how aggressively they take it, because they could definitely semi-retire by 50 on these numbers. If they wanted to do it slower than that, that would work out fine too. So it's just going to be about, like for everyone, finding that right balance between where you can enjoy your life now while also working towards a future that you're really happy about.
The other thing, I wasn't going to add this as much as I was going to ask it, Dave, but, for people like this who have assets, particularly in housing, do you think it would be a reasonable thing for an individual like this to consider debt recycling if they have the kind of cash flow buffer as a way to kind of just get that portfolio in at a larger scale? Or do you think in this situation, if someone wanted to do that, you just sell the investment property and be done with it?
Well, these people have just paid off their home, so there's no debt recycling to be done. Their only debt they have is investment debt already. Or are you referring to borrowing against their home to invest further?
Yeah, borrowing against the home. I mean, there's psychological things with that too that I wouldn't want to get past. But
yeah, they could definitely do it, but with a time frame of something like 10-ish years, and the fact that they've just paid it off and now they've got permanently lower expenses, and they've already got a very cushy scenario where they can just essentially go into cruise mode now and just save, invest, repeat the process while enjoying their life for the next decade or so. I don't think they really need to do anything else. I mean, they could if they wanted to be more aggressive and try and bring that forward, but then if they're trying to bring the date forward, then they're also shortening their investment time frame, so they're also
adding that risk.
If something happens, they're adding a risk, because if something happens in the market.
Yeah, so it'd be different if they were like 20 trying to do this by 55, 60, where they've got like 20 or 30 years. But given that time frame is shorter, it's like you're in, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't bother in this case, to be honest. Everything looks pretty good as is.